What's going on, guys? Coach Lain here with my partners Kelvin Lamb and Cameron Hockaday, and welcome to episode 1 of the Coaches Camp podcast. How you guys doing today?
Good.
So, you guys, welcome to this time together. We've decided to try this format out because we want, of course, more ways to add value and connect with you guys, but we also want you a part of the conversation. And what makes you feel more like you're a part of a conversation than sitting down and listening to people that you admire what they have to say and just listening in on their conversation. I know for me, whenever I listen to podcasts or watch a sit down or a round table, that's exactly what it makes me want to do. And so we're hoping that this inspires you to do the same. So make sure that you leave comments wherever you're listening to this, that you send us DMs. Let us know what you want us to talk about. But today, we've got some great stuff for us to talk about. But really quick, Cameron, Kelvin, why does this matter? Why does this episode matter today?
Well, should I jump in and discuss what we intend on covering today?
Yeah, let's go over our key areas of focus for this episode.
Yeah, so we are going to talk about just this, basically the time of the year that we're in. So if you're listening to this in around the time that we post it, it is the beginning of summer. It's summer practices, especially if you're on a scholastic schedule, even within the all-star season. That summer schedule is just a shift in your season. So we want to talk about this time of year and why those practices are so important and how we can kind of set the tone, how we handle attendance, just all the things that come with this time of year, as well as talk about camp. That's a big thing that hits in the summertime. And on our next episode, we'll kind of follow down the line with some more things. But basically that summer session and those camps, how are we handling those as a team? What are we looking for that best fits us? And it matters so much because how you start something can be so important to how the rest of the year goes.
And case in point right there is that you just saw, right? The fact that Cameron came out and shared what this episode is going to be talking about at the beginning makes such a huge difference as far as understanding why this episode even matters at all to you.
Now y'all know where we're headed with it.
Before we dive in, do you guys have like a personal story or like a like a funny moment that stands out to you where an amazing or terrible start to the season like set the tone for the rest of the year?
You know, I do, but I want to try to make this a little bit more relatable, I guess, outside of cheerleading. And I think one of the biggest things for me after I graduated college was, trying to figure out what I was trying to do with my life. And everywhere I was kind of going, I would try to see where my personality fit in, right? And everything kind of kept pointing back to some sort of sales, whether it was 100% commission, like one of the like those Cutco things or whatever, or for something else. But the problem was I had major call reluctance, and I had a really hard time approaching whoever the prospect was to initiate a conversation and have that sales conversation, because it was always a little bit awkward where, hey, how are you doing? Are you trying to sell me something?
Yeah.
No. Yes. Right? One of those. And that's a really odd feeling. And the thing was that when I was first starting out, we had scripts. And so we would go through the scripts, but then it would sound really canned. And that would be that example or my example of not having so great a start. I mean, it sounds good, right? It's scripted. The words are great. And it comes across like it's good. But it wasn't until much later in my sales career that I learned the most effective way to start any conversation, meeting, including cheerleading practices and how to start a season, which was starting off with what's called the 3 Ps, P, P, and P, which stands for purpose, process, and payoff. And no matter what the conversation, whether it's a sales conversation, a meeting, or like a corporate meeting or like a team meeting or a practice, if you start off letting your audience know what the purpose of the meeting is, the process you're going to take, and the payoff, not just for you, but for that person out of this particular interaction, you're going to get much more productivity out of that entire conversation and out of the person that you're trying to interact with.
I love that. I think it's something that I've adhered to without knowing the 3 Ps, intentionally or doing it intentionally. But one of the things I definitely learned over the years, I remember being a younger coach, and this was going to be like my anecdote, being a younger coach, like, 18 to 24, I was more concerned, which I think a lot of young coaches are. I was more concerned with like being their buddy and making sure that I didn't feel uncool, And so I would set the tone unknowingly, not just for the practice, but for a lot, like the first part of the season with that behavior, like coming in and joking. And I didn't know how to balance it right, because back then I wasn't commanding attention. I wasn't commanding their respect, right? It was more so like, hey, look at me and I'm doing this for me. And then when it would get disrespectful or out of line, then I would try to demand their respect, and it would just get messy, but what I've learned over time is to practice those 3 Ps again without knowing it, but like to outline the purpose of what we're going to do, outline the process, and then tell them how it's going to pay off for every practice. I don't work with teams seasonally anymore, but when I was working with them weekly, it was like night and day. There was never any attitude adjustments that needed to be had. There was never a time where the kids weren't like, I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm bored, or like they were acting out because they didn't, see the purpose of us doing what we were doing. And it was very refreshing, to the point where I was like, what the hell was I doing wrong before? So it, I think those 3 Ps are very poignant and, definitely are going to help you set the tone better for your season.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know if y'all know this about me, but I kind of got drugged back into cheerleading accidentally when I got married and moved to Mississippi, where my husband lives. They didn't have a job field in what I used to do, so that's how I got back into, or I started teaching. They're like, oh, get your alternate route and teach. So I did. I took night classes, and then boom, it's like I can be a teacher. Well, I needed a job for the starting season, and I applied to all these school districts, but they don't know until all their other teachers either sign their contracts. So I found out 2 weeks before the school year started that I was going to teach the 4th grade. And I was in a wedding, my cousin's wedding. I was the maid of honor the day that school started. So I was like, oh my gosh. And there's all this stuff when you're going through teaching school about how the start of the year is so important, and how those first few days of school are just the absolute cornerstone. And I wasn't going to be there for it. So sure enough, my first year teaching, it was like constantly playing catch up. And then I got bumped to the high school to teach business courses. So I had to start over again in the middle of a school year. And it was an absolute nightmare, because again, I didn't have those foundational days with the kids to really set the tone. Like Kelvin said, the purpose, like, this is who I am, this is what this class is, this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to get out of it. So that whole first year was just constantly playing catch up on trying to be like, no, this is what we're doing, this is who we are, this is the tone. So that one hits hard for me, about just being present and having intention with how you start anything, your school year, your season, a business meeting. It makes such an impact on how things flow from there.
Or you ever play a game? You ever play a game when you were a kid with somebody and you were trying to learn the game, right? And so you're kind of going over the rules a little bit at the beginning, right? And then you do something in the middle of the game and they're like, oh, you can't do that.
Right.
Yes. Right. And so that's kind of like what we go through as coaches, right? Like if we start off the entire season with expectations, standards, how we handle different scenarios and different situations, and we let the team we let the team know what they can expect from each other, from us, and what we're expecting from them, then that just goes so much smoother throughout the entire season, instead of introducing those random rules partway through and they go, oh, you didn't tell me.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. 100%.
I think Most Def put it best when he said, you start keeping pace, they start changing up the tempo. Right? Like that's how it feels sometimes, where you're just getting into the groove and all of a sudden you got to change it up, or like Kelvin said, you got to be, oh, wait, actually that's not what we're doing. That's not what we're about, so. All right, guys, well, let's dive into it. So we are talking about summer practices. We're talking about intention over intensity first. Cameron and Kelvin, since you guys tend to work with, especially you, Cameron, you tend to work with teams on a more regular basis. And Cameron, you've always had really, really good advice on Coaches Camp, on all of our platforms, on Circle Community, on Instagram, wherever I've seen you comment. You have really good ideas for structuring practices. So why don't you kick us off with what a summer practice should look like in terms of frequency, structure, how flexible one should be during practice, et cetera.
Yeah, so I actually had a coach that inspired me to kind of think about this time of the year within our circle community asked me, how are you handling summer practices? And this is a common question, like the kids are in and out of town. I can't get all my stunt groups there. It's how are we holding them accountable? But then some programs, you're not allowed to have that. And I think there's a lot of ways that you can go about this, even if you're not allowed to require the practices. If you're a competitive team, odds are you need to be practicing in the summer. That doesn't necessarily mean every single day. That can look different for different teams. The coaches needs, the team needs, the practice facilities, but odds are you're going to need to practice every day. I think to structure that, you really need to think about what do you need to physically be there for, and are there elements that they can do on their own that you can still hold them accountable for, but outside of practice. So you might physically have them every day during the school year because it's part of a class or it's required, but what can you maybe subtract from those normal practices from summer? So that might mean, for example, if they've got to learn a certain cheer, chant, band chant for football season, they've got this list of stuff they have to learn. Do you really physically need to supervise that? Or can you get it filmed? Can you send that home? Can you incorporate that into some more downtime during the summer where they're still required to be learning? And then they have to come back having it learned, and then you can have performance cuts to hold them accountable. If they know the material, they cheer in the ball games. If they don't know the material, they're sitting until they make the next performance cut. That's what we did with our season. That one allows you to incorporate a little bit more of that downtime during the summer, because although I think intensity is important, you need some of the ups and downs within your season. And usually if you're competing nationally, you've just come off an absolute grind of, you start with football and it's all exciting, but then you have basketball and practicing for competition and your schedule just gets chaotic. And then you have nationals, and then the kids are having finals. So they need that breath to have maybe avoid some burnout. So I think you need to find a way to lessen that summer schedule a little bit by letting them do things like that on their own, and then just finding ways to hold them accountable. Also conditioning. You asked me, what would be part of my summer schedule? It would 100% involve conditioning. But there may be ways you can also hold them accountable to that outside of practices. Maybe you're physically with them for a certain conditioning day, but there's a body weight circuit they do or a required sprint circuit they do that they film, or they send you a screenshot of their, most of them have smartphones. So you can hold them accountable in different ways for that a little bit. As far as physically, when you're in person with your kids during the summer, you're working your basics, your fundamentals, and you're laying down what your expectations are, because some of these kids are new to your program. Hopefully you've had kids come through that are kind of showing those standards, but this is how we roll up mats. This is the time that I expect you to be here. This is the time that your parents are picking you up if you have that involved. This is how we get water, we don't just walk over when we want and take a bite of our snack bar. Like, you're kind of setting the standard for what a practice should look like and walking them through all that. So the foundations of how you want your program to run. Also, this is how we prep for a stunt. This is how we finish a stunt. And if we don't do it just because we hit the stunt, we're going to go back and do it the right way. So really painstakingly going through those basic fundamentals. Same thing with motions, like taking the time to stop them in the summer before it carries over into fall. And now we have sloppy techniques, sloppy motions, and we're like, oh, we have to clean everything. I like to really nitpick and go way back to fundamentals in that summertime to then set up a strong fall season. And then I guess one more thing I'll hit on that the coach asked about was absences. We were not required to have our kids, or we were not allowed to require our kids at summer practices, although we could have them all summer long with the exception of one true dead week per the county. We still had consequences for missing practices, but it was for the child's benefit. So they had, for every practice they missed, there was a conditioning circuit that they were required to complete, not as necessarily punishment. It was because you are physically missing out on what your teammates are doing at practice, and we don't want you to fall behind physically. So we tracked it in that way. And then there would be natural consequences as well. So if somebody missed camp, they had a wedding or whatever, they just naturally, if we were performing that camp material at the first pep rally, they probably would not be in that material, or they would be an alternate for that material. We're not going to go back and rework if we can't. So just more natural consequences like that. Same thing with the ball game material. If they missed the day where we cleaned the material and we were about to perform it at our first ball game, they will probably sit for that until they can pass a performance check, something like that. That was a
I like
lot.
that.
Let me let y'all
No,
jump
no,
in.
that's great. It's thorough. It's what people are here to listen to, and the information that they're looking for. And I'm sure that on the community, that's a very well articulated answer to the question that was
Thanks.
posed. Thinking about, it's funny listening to you talk. It makes me think about a choreographer's view of how practices are structured, because everything is laid out. Just like when I'm watching choreography, you can tell when facials haven't been choreographed, right? But the
Oh,
coach is
yeah.
like, "Come on, facials, I need more facials." It's like, well, that's kind of telling me I can do anything at any point. Instead, you could tell the teams that have really good facial expressions during their routine, they've been
Mhm.
choreographed, right, at
Yeah.
those poignant points. So it's nice listening to you talk about intention,
Mhm.
because it sounds like the way that you structure your summer practices, it's all about intention. Everything is intentional. Everything is laid out. It's like if I'm going to teach you a back tuck, let me show you how you're going to land before I show you how you're going to take off, right? Like, I want to
Yes.
make sure you understand how it's going to finish, and so you're making sure everything's laid out. Kelvin, can you touch on something that I think you always speak on very well? Um, keeping the athletes engaged without burning them out, and then how do you get them to attend without there being a power struggle involved?
Well, actually, a couple things. I feel like, well, just kind of touch on your comment earlier. I feel like every practice should be intentional, right? Not just the summer ones. Um, in fact, everything that we do as a coach needs to be intentional as a response to the previous practice or the previous performance or the previous whatever. Um, and so, you know, I think that's just something that we as coaches we can't get lazy on through the season. Now, as far as keeping athletes engaged without overwhelming them in the summer and things like that, you know, um, on top of the things that Cameron shared, summertime is, because it's the beginning of the season, you have maybe a strong group of returners, and then you have, maybe some new people to the team. This is the time to initiate team bonding, team building. And so mixing that in always kind of gives, at least the new people, if not everybody, a little bit of sense of FOMO, right? So then now they're wanting to come, they're wanting to attend, because each time maybe they have a big little situation, right? Big sis, little sis, whatever. Excuse me, where maybe things are like there's little gifts along the way, and then it leads up to a big reveal. So if you miss something, you miss this. There's little fun things like that, but realistically, tying that into what one of the things that Cameron shared as far as things that they can do on their own when they do have a big little, now they can go through a team building process where the big and the little get together, whether virtually or in person, through the summer on their own without the supervision of a coach, to go over cheers and chants, to go over motion sharpness and motion placement. It gives the returner an opportunity to practice leadership on a small enough scale to where if they make mistakes, it's not going to impact the biggest thing in the world, right? It's not going to impact the entire team. But it also allows them that chance to test those waters, and then possibly get this new person far ahead of the game when it comes time to the first official practice, whenever that meeting is. And so I think this is where some programs do a great job of this, some programs do none of this, and then there's coaches that actually confuse and conflate the two, where they think team building and team bonding are the same thing, and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not.
It's
It
a
is
good
not.
point.
So, Team bonding would be, hey, let's get to know each other on a more personal level so that when we interact during practice, we don't take things so personally. Something like that, right? And of course, it can be expanded beyond that. But then team building is giving everybody an opportunity to either step up as leaders or show and display credibility, demonstrate credibility through their hard work, right? And then get to practice the communication and listening skills that are required to be able to function well as a team. So that's very different. But I'd say, summertime, building that in, and then as a coach, taking that opportunity to set up coaching cues that may take a little bit longer as far as time goes to give a definition, to get their understanding so that you can use them later in a quicker, rapid fire type of action to be able to get faster coaching and better utilize that time throughout the season. So that was just more to complement what Cameron shared, as well as hopefully try to attempt to answer the questions that you posed. Did I answer the question, Lain?
Yeah, well, you also ended up segueing a little bit into our next topic of conversation, which is chemistry, leadership, and like setting the bar. One thing that I thought of when you were giving that last answer is, team building is almost a way of setting up the bonding opportunities, right? Like you introduce a team building exercise or scenario. And I agree, because one thing that I was thinking is the coaches who missed the mark because they are so focused on forcing bonding. They're so focused on forcing relationships, where relationships have to be organic. You guys know, like, do you guys ever watch Survivor or any other like competition shows? Right. And like these shows are filmed, even though they go on for a full season, they're filmed like in the course of a week. Right. Okay. I think we can all safely say a week is not.
You mean each episode?
Right. Like, each episode is whittled down from hours upon hours of footage that they have, right? And the entire competition for a lot of these shows will take place over a week, anywhere between a week and a month, right? Production companies try not to go too far beyond that because it's expensive. So I think we can agree, like that's not enough time to build like a real strong bond with anyone, something that's lifelong and lasting. However, we humans have a chemical that helps us with that, because humans are not designed to survive on our own, right? We need to find our tribe. And so serotonin steps in and helps to make that bond stronger, because serotonin can help you feel bonded without there being any real connection, like intimate emotional connection. And so the reason I asked is because I always find it funny when you're watching these shows and someone gets voted off that first day and like people are sobbing. Oh my God, like they were such good friends. It's like, no, you weren't. That's serotonin. That's how you were supposed to feel. But I think, that's what coaches are going for. They want that strong, fierce bond, and you can't force that. That's something that has to happen organically. And so I like that distinction that you made, Kelvin, because we should look at team building as the stepping stones for bonding to be able to happen between the athletes.
Yeah, and what's weird too though is like when a lot of coaches think of this stuff, they think, oh, let's do laser tag, let's do capture the flag, let's do a sleepover, right? But true bonding and team building actually happens through adversity. Mm-hmm. So setting up a situation for them to struggle together and go, nope, hey, I got you. Let me pick you up. And giving them the opportunity to do that for each other. One of the things that I used to do, honestly, was I had my team do a 5-mile run. And I wouldn't, not just around a track. Because if we did it around a track, somebody could just walk the whole way or whatever, right? And they could not finish and just let time run out, right? Yeah. Instead, I had them do a trail. And so if they didn't finish, they weren't going home.
They still had to walk back to the bus.
they had to get back somehow. They were finishing that 5 miles no matter what, right? But what it did, though, was it gave an opportunity. I'll never forget it, man. His name was Ryan Hale. This one year, he was a returner. He finally got to be in his third year. Okay, it's finally his third year, and he crushes the 5 miles in like 45 minutes.
Dang.
Like, and that's barely walking, kind of. It's like a good, roughly almost a 10-minute mile ish,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And just under a 10-minute mile. But he crushes it, and he gets done. He's back at our starting point, right? And then he looks at me, he looks back, and he goes, "Be right back, coach." He jogs backwards on the trail and goes to find the next person. Guides them back, then goes back again, finds the next person. And like, I swear,
Wow,
man,
that's
it gets me
beautiful.
kind of choked up inside. But
Yeah,
like, he
man.
did it on his own. He did
That
it
is
like,
beautiful.
then he naturally set up a situation where he became the go-to leader
Yeah.
for everybody on the team. I never had captains. I don't believe in actually like the need of having captains. But
Same.
he set himself up to naturally be a leader for everybody on the team because they felt like they could trust him, and they knew he was going to be there for them.
I think that is the perfect segue. I have a similar story, but that's a perfect segue to this next session or section. But it makes me think of my all-time favorite Simon Sinek quote, which is, "A leader, better to be a leader without a title than to have a title without the ability to lead."
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that quote because it rings true so many times, especially in captain situations. I've been, back when I was doing weekly classes, was working with so many teams who had captains who were the worst leaders. I mean, like the absolute worst choice to be the spokesperson or the leader, the figurehead for a team. And yet there were other girls and some guys on co-ed teams who were much more of a natural leader just because they would go the extra mile. People would gravitate toward them for advice or for leadership or for guidance. And I think that's something that is always important to keep in mind when choosing, if you're going to do captains, keep that in mind. And when you're going through the summer, these bonding situations, that's the time where you start looking for those qualities to start standing out and say, who is, regardless of ever having a title, who is stepping up and showing leadership quality. And it's not, hey, everyone look at me, do as I say. That's not a leader, right? Again, Simon Sinek says leaders eat last. They're like Ryan Hale. They're the people who may finish first, but they're going to get that reward last, right? They're going to make sure everybody else eats first. They're going to make sure that they are sacrificing a little bit more of their time, effort, strength, energy to make sure everybody is lifted up together. And so it's stuff like that you're going to be looking for throughout the season. In a very similar fashion, I played soccer one year in my freshman year in high school, and I knew nobody. It was at a brand new school. And man, in one day, when I tell you we became bonded as a team in one day, at least I felt bonded. And I know there were a couple of us freshmen that felt the same way, because it was very clear who were the returners, who were the stars, who were the seniors. Like all of that was very clear. And they hazed you a little bit, to let you know and make sure you didn't forget, but it wasn't terrible. But this one day, the coach took us out in the blazing heat, up here in Northern California. It can get to triple-digit days. And so we went out on a 100-plus day for a run. And it was only about 1.5 miles, maybe 2 miles. But he made us do, I don't remember what they call it, but where the person in the rear of the line has to sprint to the front.
That's what I call warrior runs.
Yeah. And
I
man, talk about, Kelvin, you were saying, it's adversity and struggle that bonds you fastest. That's exactly what it did. And for a group, I think that was our first practice. And for a group of guys who didn't know each other, right? And then at the end of the 2 miles, there was a hill. And he was like, I think that was all on the spot. He was like, you know what? We're going to not crab walk. We're going to basically bear crawl up the hill. And man, like everybody was just cheering each other on. And it was just such a great experience. And if we hadn't done that, I doubt that I would have such a lasting memory of that season. But that set the tone for the season, that right there. So just be thinking about that stuff. But Cameron, why don't you take us into this next section? And then Kelvin, you have extensive experience with running camps. I want you to chime in too. How do coaches choose the right camp experience?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times I've noticed just being on social media and coaches from around the country reaching out. Obviously, there's one major player in the industry that hosts camps nationwide. So when people think of camp, that's kind of oh, well, this is where we go to camp. Oftentimes, though, well, and with the lawsuit happening, obviously, there's maybe no longer a requirement to go to camp to be able to compete nationally. So that has shaken things up, as well as people just looking for a different experience. I think there are things to be said for a large branded camp as far as maybe some of that team bonding and spending time together and spending the night together in dorm, like that's something in its own. And I think there's a lot of good bonding, but there are a lot of great options to have a camp. And I think as a coach, it's important, one, to even know, hey, I've got more options out there than what may come to mind. But two, what am I trying to get out of this for my team? So I was just talking to a coach about, I'm going to a master's camp and what should my expectations be, or I'm going to UCA camp for the first time. And my biggest thing is take a step back and like, what are you trying to get out of this? You paid all this money. Are you there's going to be a competition maybe on the last day. Do you care about that? What do you want your kids to be focused on? Do you need to talk to them about what that day will look like and what you want them focused on, or do you want what the camp is kind of leading you to focus on? So for me, we wanted to see how our kids handled adversity, as Kelvin brought up adversity, because we took our kids to a master's camp through varsity. Because we were required to go to a varsity camp because we did compete at nationals. Honestly, we probably would have chosen an independent camp if that weren't the requirement and we weren't trying to budget for everything, because what we really wanted was introduction of new skills and development from athletes currently in the industry still. So like as coaches, we're not cheering anymore. So we want to see what are the new rules, what are the new skills, all of that. So for us, that was a major, this is what we're looking for in a camp, which is why we chose a master's camp. And then two, we wanted our kids to face adversity together. So we want the hard camp. We didn't really want all the extra like bonding or resort time. We were like, they can have their own, little summer parties together, but we want this to be difficult. We want to see how they handle it, and we want to guide them through it. We want them to be physically and mentally exhausted to where they're forced to handle that as an athlete, because you're going to face that in the season. So we talked to our kids about that going into it. We told them how long the days are going to be, how much their muscles are going to hurt. They may get injured. They may be bruised. They are going to be exhausted. And that's when we're going to be looking to see how they handle things. Not did you hit your stunt, but how did you treat your teammates? How did you treat the staff? How was your attitude? And did we lift each other up or did we fall apart? So that was kind of our big speech before camp. And those were our expectations for our kids to say, hey, we're going to put you in a tough situation and we're going to be guiding you and looking for you to see how you handle it when it's tough or when the tears want to come because you're frustrated because you can't hit this skill or whatever. We also talked to them about that last day, which was like the competition day. For us at the Masters, you don't really compete. It's just like a showcase. But even still, we want to show we are a clean program, like we don't really care if we're doing the most elite skill that they showed at camp. We want to do a clean skill that our kids can hit confidently, because we also want to see them perform under pressure. And we know that they can perform when they're confident in what they're going to hit. So for us, it wasn't necessarily pushing the highest level skill that day. It was, what are you going to go out there and hit? And then seeing how our kids handle kind of a performance environment. It was the first time they had to like perform facially. So you might have some kids that are really strong athletes, but you realize maybe through tryouts and camp that, hey, these kids need help with performance. Like they got skills out the wazoo, but they're nothing going on after they throw that standing full. So that kind of helped us assess that situation. But so to put all that together, I think as a coach, step back and say, what do I need to get out of camp? Is it just the bonding? Do I need material? Do I need to learn a bunch of chants and dances? Do I need somebody that is more skilled than I am to teach them stunts? Do I need like a choreography camp where they're going to teach me? So finding out what you need from camp and then going from there to say, where am I going to get this? Is it an independent camp? Is it somebody that comes to me, which I think often are really great. Independents tend to make camps very custom to what you need, as long as they have the background to provide that for you. Or if you do your own type of home camp, like still give it the structure so you can get those experiences for the kids, like performing for their parents at the end, or having some sort of like all-American tryout. Like you can put that together yourself. But let me pause and let Kelvin step in, because I feel like he would have a lot of things to say about like camps and what you can get out of them and how they can vary a lot depending on who you're going with.
Well, I don't know if I have too many things extra to share on top of what you just shared, but I do know this. I know that the things that make a large branded away camp unique, I guess, is the ability to be around like-minded people where you can then compare and contrast team culture. I think that's one.
That's a good point. That's really good.
Mostly because I think a lot of schools and a lot of programs probably experience that feeling of being almost like that proverbial redheaded stepchild of the department. You know, so they don't get the practice facilities, they don't get the budget, the resources, but then now they're in an environment where it's other cheerleaders and they get to bond and grow and make friends with that, right? And they also get to compare their practice culture. Right? Okay, that team is successful over there. What are they doing? How are we different? Oh, they jog everywhere? Let's start jogging everywhere.
I like that. Using comparison
you know what I mean?
for
Things
good.
like that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing would be exactly what you shared, where this is an opportunity for them to actually bond and build their cohesiveness through adversity, right? And I love the way you shared about how you set that up, how you positioned that situation, that opportunity. I will say by now, I think the majority of programs out there, if their school has had a cheerleading program for, even if it's not the same coach consecutively, for, I don't know, 5+ years, they probably don't need a bunch of new chants or cheers, right? They probably, well, I mean, there's two situations that could arise from learning the same dances as all those other athletes and all those other teams. One is you don't have to come up with something for like the next halftime or whatever, right? But you're not going to compete it. It might even be useful to be like, oh, hey, I know I'm going to see this other team at some point. Let's do a joint halftime. We all know the same dance. Ta-da, we're done.
Right.
So there's different things like that could happen. But for the most part, you're probably not going to use that dance in other situations. When it comes to stunting, majority of the time, it might be a little bit different at a master's camp, but majority of the time, they got 1, maybe 2 hours for stunting. And that's just realistically not enough time to learn anything new. What they're doing is they're watching a demo group show off, give some key points here and there, and then, all right, go try it. And if they're not close, they're probably not going to get it.
Right.
You know, like as in if they weren't close before they got to camp, they're probably not going to get it. And so that's one of those behind the curtain things, right? And I think coaches that have taken their teams to camp, especially in a way large branded camp for a number of years, they see that and they understand that piece. I think a lot of the things that you shared, actually almost everything that you shared is probably all the important stuff. And what I will say about that is that the majority of programs can actually set that up on their own. Like if you take a look at football, baseball, soccer, basketball, none of these other sports have this collective style camp where other teams come together. They want their camp to be a situation surrounded and filled with adversity so that they could see who their go-to players are going to be, right? And they learn the drills, they set up their own play so they can go and compete that way. And surely we can do the same thing, and that's what I did when I was coaching at San Jose State, is I wanted to get them ready for the games. We had our own traditions already set. We're going to do this. And then if you really want to learn new stunts and all this stuff, you can bring in a specialist. Or you can do the education on your own. If you want more tumbling stuff, you can also bring in a specialist. If you want choreography, you can do that at a later time and bring in a specialist. But then, as far as spending the money that is required to go to an away camp for the amount of value that you can extract from it, I don't know how much longer that is going to seem like a necessity, honestly, to a lot of teams, given the way our industry has been decentralizing. So, that's my thought. I say when you're in a situation where you can pick a la carte and just kind of piece it together, you might as well, because that's now you as the coach making the best decision you can make for your team instead of giving it up to somebody else and going, whatever you think, right? You want a hand in that.
This last week, I spent a couple days over at the cheer gym that I coach out of, and they were having day camp for different individuals, families, and listening to you guys made me think about this, right? Talking about like cultivating your camp experience and maybe culture. So the first group from last week, I was there for 3 of those days, 3 of like the 5 days, and it was chaos. Like the little girls were like always fighting. One of them was always crying. There was this other one, she was 5 years old, and she was just like, what the heck is going on with these older girls? Like, but like the people in charge were, one of them was way too young, but they were, just not engaging with them. And I was thinking about this when Cameron, you were talking. This week, I was there one day, and it was like I walked into a completely different gym culture, a completely different experience. The girls were laughing, and there was a lot of the same kids. They were laughing, they were getting along, and the main difference was the caretakers or the instructors or whatever you want to call them, like the counselors, were engaging with them. They were playing games. The first week, TV was on all the time. It was just like, hey, well, we put out all this stuff for you guys to do. Just go do it. This week, it was, hey, let's do this now. Let's do this. In 5 minutes, you guys, we're going to do this. Hey, Coach Lain is here. He's having a private lesson. Let's clean up, make room for him. Like, it was just communication was so much stronger with that second group, and it made a ton of difference. But the engagement is what made, even more of a difference. So it just made me think of that when you were talking about, what kind of camp experience do you want? Because it is going to make a difference. And it doesn't matter how old the kids are. They could be 5 to 8. They can be, 15 to 21. Like, it doesn't matter how old they are. You have to communicate effectively. And you got to make sure that you always, going back to the 3 Ps, purpose, what is it? Purpose, plan, and payoff? Purpose, process, and payoff. You always got to make sure you're communicating those things. Sorry, go ahead,
Just
Kelvin.
one more thing. And honestly, when it comes to fun, I think that's where it's our job as coaches to help these athletes, young or old, navigate and understand what fun really is. Yeah. Yes, there's fun in the moment, and then there's learning how to have fun through working hard. Learning how to have fun by loving that struggle.
Trusting the process.
Because they assuming there's a process to trust.
Assuming there's a process to trust.
Right? That they enjoy that process of seeking delayed gratification, building their grit, right? Because oftentimes when we go to these camps, we're not building grit. We're screaming for a banana.
Right.
Right? We're chanting for no reason at all so that we could have this stick.
Yeah. Do they still do that? They still do spirit sticks?
Yeah. Well, and just so you know, the whole idea of the spirit stick actually was birthed and born from a really good place, right? It was meant to incentivize good behavior during camp, and
for sure,
and following instructions and things like that.
Then it became a trophy.
It morphed into this thing where, hey guys, let's time it out. Let's time it out so that right when we're about 200 feet away from where the staffers can hear us, let's start chanting. But before that, they're not. They're just whatever. Like, they're just being themselves. Like what are we teaching these athletes to be fake?
Yes,
just
a lot
to
of
get
times.
A prize, or is there a bigger picture there that we can teach, right? Yeah. Where we're teaching grit, hard work, like what, so, cause getting those things are fun. Yelling, watching cool stunts, that's fun. But what does it get you? Playing games is fun, but what is the learning from it? They're like going back to what you were saying before. There has to be that intention behind it, and understanding that intention, and then, making sure the athletes know what that purpose and that intention and the payoff out of that is. So I just wanted to wrap that up in there.
Well, again, I think that's a great segue into this next quick bit that I wanted to go over with you guys. Maybe we could each take like a minute or two to talk about it. But, one of the things that I am always screaming at coaches when I'm doing, coaches training or I'm talking to different coaches is culture, and understanding culture. I really should have studied like sociology in college, because that's what I am now realizing. Like, I'm really passionate behind the psychology, or next to psychology is sociology, and like really understanding the culture. But like, what is the importance of building culture in non-competition settings? And then another thing I want you guys to touch on, or that we should all touch on, is outlining the why of your season, right? And I think that that's going to be on a macro and a micro level. It should be macro for the team. It should be even more macro for the school, like how we represent the school, or how we represent whatever team we are out here representing. But then it should also be on the coaches level and the athletes level. But what is the importance of outlining your why in terms of how you're framing your season? And then what implications do those things have on building culture, or how can we build culture in a non-competition setting? Like, because your culture should not just be reflective of competition day, and how other people see you on those days.
Well, it's so funny that we, it's not so funny, it's a little funny that we,
No, I was joking.
well, that we think of this as like competition, not competition, competitive, not competitive. Like, first off, I don't even remember who said it, but it's not my quote, but how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah, it's facts.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's for a specific competition event or not. How you practice is how you're going to perform. How you practice for a performance that's non-competitive is how you practice for one that is.
What's done in darkness will be shown in the light. How you are is how you are.
Exactly. Numerous quotes, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that, like, I don't know about you, but like for me, when I was an athlete, and then not so much when I was a student, when I was in high school. I wasn't a very good student, I don't think. I mean, I was like a 3.5 student, so but I wouldn't consider myself a good student. But when I got to my master's program, right? That time when I was a student then, and then now as a solopreneur, I'm always competing.
Yeah.
There's never a non-competitive situation. Not that I'm always competing against somebody else, but I'm always competing against my previous self.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, because that type of competition is what breeds progression. That's the healthy competition. And so,
well, this is a good point to ask why. This is a good point to start outlining your why, like using yourself as an example, right? Because I think the three of us can agree with that, like especially as solopreneurs, like we're always trying to one up ourselves. And then I think the beautiful thing with this group is that we're always using each other as a healthy comparison, but what is the why that drives that competition, that competitive spirit within yourself?
Me personally?
Yeah, personally.
Okay. Well, because I believe the reason that we compete is ultimately self-discovery. I don't think it gets bigger. I don't think it gets bigger than that. Learn, like, because like, I believe it was Bruce Lee who said it. Figuring out your opponent to beat your opponent takes a moment, takes an instant.
Mm-hmm.
But learning who you truly are takes a lifetime.
I love that.
And so, that's all we do, right? That, like when you peel back all the layers, this is what you're left with.
Yeah.
And
well,
so,
I love that because, I mean, you guys know my stance on it. Like, the only reason that cheerleading uses the word competition is to make money off of parents. Like, we don't compete. Like, let's be honest, we don't compete. We are contestants. And so if you're looking at it like, oh, I have to beat her or I have to beat that team, I always hate when I hear coaches emphasizing that, or parents even emphasizing that, because that's not what we're here to do. You're here for, like you said, self-discovery. And like, this is, if you really yield to that process, you learn so much about yourself. I have this one girl who was a part of our cheer program back when my parents had a gym. This is 20 years ago. She's a prolific bodybuilder and personal trainer for she has, like, her client list is just extensive, but like she always attributes her work ethic to like being back at our gym, and I'm like, that's very flattering, but I don't think that we had anything to do with that. That was the self-discovery part of it. That was what you learned about yourself through the adversity and through those hard days and through that time that you felt you were, bonding and learning. And so I think that that's like super important is to, to highlight. I love that you said that, because that's exactly what we're doing. We're not competing with anybody. We are doing our best to be better than our previous self every single day. And in that process, through that process, learning who we truly are, who we want to be, what we like and don't like, and what we'd like to improve upon. Cameron, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you just asked about kind of culture in general.
Yeah.
For me, when I was coaching, and now too, when I get the opportunity to work with these athletes and coaches, I just always had to remind myself that I was a role model for the girls, whether I liked it or not, And so are they going to see, like, they're watching, how am I handling when somebody has a bad attitude? How am I handling when we don't get the practice facility that we scheduled ahead of time? How am I handling when we think we should have won a competition, but we got second? Or, like, how am basically, like, they are watching me live my life. So I'm not only coaching them, but I am modeling for them. So that's kind of part of, I would say, the culture that I was trying to establish is not just how am I getting these athletes to compete and do well or to look good on a Friday night. It's how am I showing up for these athletes to help them build skills that will help them handle their life in the future, and hopefully that I'm handling mine in a way that they could model or learn from, even in my mistakes, and being transparent about that. Because the things that, and this is for any team sport, like that's why I love team sports, is it gives such a great opportunity to teach young athletes about hard work, discipline, like Kelvin said, grit and delayed gratification, like respect for themselves, for their facilities, because all of that is going to show up later when they have a college roommate, when they're married, when they have a fight, when they have a family, when they have a child testing their nerves, like when they have a job interview and they're having to perform under pressure. Like all of this just gets repackaged in different things for them later in life. So if we can have a culture that the why is because I need you to do this hard thing, I need you to have this kind of response, let me teach you how to handle this situation that seems unfair, because that's going to be the makeup of their life, and they're getting an opportunity to learn it under the guidance of an athletic program and a sport they love. So it's a really cool blessing if you think about it that way, and maybe try to build your culture around skills that will help them as they face these challenges packaged as an adult later.
I 1000% agree. It also reminds me of another fact that, biochemically stress trickles down. It's not going to come from the kids and go up to you. It's always going to be the way that you respond to situations, right? As the alpha of the group, or, whatever. Yeah. But like as the perceived leader, right, of the children, your stress, your anxiety is going to trickle down to them. And so how you respond to situations, and responses are choices that we make. So how you respond to situations is how they are going to learn to respond in those high stakes situations as well. Well, you guys, this has been a great time. I think that this is a great format for the three of us, and I love it. And we hope that you guys have found tremendous value. Before we take off, next episode we're going to be talking about choreography mindset and setting season-long standards, which is going to be great. But before we go, we have a coach challenge for you guys listening. Take 10 minutes to write 3 non-negotiables you want to build this year. Then check and see if your summer plan supports them. Take 10 minutes to write 3 non-negotiables that you want to build into your program this year. Kelvin, Cameron, anything before we sign off?
That was fun, guys.
Yeah.
I can't wait to do the next one.
Hey, I second that.
Yeah. Well, one of my non-negotiables, if you have one, that was my pet peeve, or if you're trying to brainstorm, was how we set up and roll out mats. That was like the bane of our existence when we first started. And I was like, you know what? We are going to fix this in the beginning of the season, and it's going to be part of culture. So if anybody needs to get their list started.
I like that.
Hey, real quick, can I just brag a little bit and share that I got our team to be able to take 60 seconds to roll out all 9 mats.
But they were the perforated mats, right? They weren't the single foam.
And then 60 seconds to put them away. And just to put it into context, it was out of necessity. We had to set up for our nationals performance. So we had literally 60 seconds to roll them out, do our performance, and then roll them up and come back up. So it wasn't just like, hey, Kelvin's bright ideas. No, we had a time constraint.
Right.
But we came up with a system to do that, and it was fast. And
cool.
actually, it was the ones that you had to flip over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Mad respect because
Well,
those could take a whole team just to roll one. So.
Well, it made it easy because we got to alternate them. So roll them all out once, flip them over, boom, and roll out the next one, flip them over the other way, and then Velcro down.
Okay.
Yeah, we came up with a way to do it. So anyway,
that's awesome.
That was fun.
Well, you guys, thank you again for listening. Stay tuned for the wrap up and a little preview for next week, and we will talk to you guys on the next episode. Peace out.